All right, I think I'll go ahead and get started. So thanks everyone for joining us tonight. We're really looking forward to this lecture by Tatiana Bilbao. Just a few things before we get started. Anyone who's interested in getting AIA credits, you can put them into the chat. Your name and your AIA number, I'll record those and get those sent in. I also wanted to mention just a few upcoming lectures we're also excited about. On Friday, we have the Euler Wu Collaborative, who are going to be giving the Fitzgibbon charrette, and they're going to be giving a lecture to kind of kick off that charrette at 6 p.m. That is Friday evening. And then after spring break, on March 21st, we have Bet Capdeferro and Ramon Bosch, who are the Ruth and Norman Moore visiting faculty teaching in the Barcelona program this semester. It'll be a noon lecture, so it'll be a great opportunity for the rest of us to be able to get to know them who are teaching over in Spain. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand this off to Heather to give the introduction.
Thank you, Chandler. Good evening and welcome. My name is Heather Wolfter, and I'm the director of the College of Architecture and Graduate School of Architecture and Urban Design, which also includes landscape architecture. I am pleased to welcome you to this evening's lecture. The College of Architecture sponsors the event this evening through the Sam Fox School support from the estate of Eleanor Schewe and the On Olive Project in Grand Center, St. Louis. Eleanor graduated from Washington University in St. Louis with a degree in architecture in 1941. Subsequently, Dr. Schewe received her master's and doctoral degrees in biology from Bryn Mawr. Her lifetime of varied projects culminated in medical surgery research for tissue transplantation. Notably, her architectural background, specifically the engineering and illustrative talents, were integral to her work. She was an early pioneer of multidisciplinary thinking. Special thanks also go to the On Olive team, particularly Emily Pulitzer, Steve Trampe of Owen Development, and Jim Maloney, manager of the Pulitzer Family Office. The long-sighted vision of On Olive provides us with a national model for urban living. It is sensible and sensitive strategies of domesticity, interiors that prioritize light, neighborhoods that value community, a variety of domestic units connected through beautiful labyrinthine gardens, and with a typology rarely promoted in the US. The pattern and density of interior-exterior spaces strengthen connections from St. Louis University to Grand Center. Emily Pulitzer is a president of the board for the Pulitzer Center on Crisis Reporting, Raising Awareness of Underreported Global Issues, founder of the Pulitzer Arts Foundation, and a member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. She also is an alumna of Bryn Mawr and École de Loup and Harvard University. Through On Olive, Ms. Pulitzer established a distinctive group of designers, including Tatiana Bilbao ESTUDIO, Moss, Productura, Macias Paredo, Michael Maltzin Architecture, and Howler and Yoon. In addition, Mrs. Pulitzer envisioned 2 competitions to attract additional talent. As a result, Corey Henry won the National Black Emerging Architect Competition, and our very own Constance Vail, the St. Louis Emerging Architect Award. Tatiana Bilbao was a fitting choice to orchestrate the assembly of domestic space in the On Olive project ground. Tatiana started as an advisor in the Ministry of Development and Housing of the government of the Federal District of Mexico City. During this time, she was part of the General Development Directorate of the Advisory Council for Urban Development in the city. Her work aims to integrate social values, collaboration, and sensitive design approaches to architectural work, from master plans to affordable housing typologies. Her projects create continuity and in-between spaces with the surrounding landscape, works designed to adjust with changing scales. The model does not call for exclusivity. Instead, they engage models of shared resources where families overlap. In other words, the scale adjusts to multiple grades where various neighborhoods, types, costs of housing can coexist in planning for the future of St. Louis. Fumiko Maki, author of Investigations in Collective Form and architect of the Kemper Art Museum, Steinberg, and also Walker Hall, wrote, "Linkage is simply the glue of the city. It is the act by which we unite all layers of activity and resulting physical form in the city. It is the space between which makes the site and interior permeable to one another. The landscape of On Olive creates conditions of continuity between various houses and establishes a precedent of examining the space between with precisely dimensioned thresholds and openings that capture a site relational geometry." Tatiana Bilbao ESTUDIO is located in Mexico City and founded by Tatiana in 2004. She holds a recurring teaching position at Yale University School of Architecture and has taught at Harvard University GSD, the AA Association in London, Columbia University, Rice University, and the University of Andre Bello in Chile. And also the Peter Behrens School of Arts at HS Dusseldorf in Germany. Tatiana received the Kunstpreis in Berlin in 2012, was named in 2010 as an emerging voice by the Architectural League of New York, the Global Award for Sustainable Architecture Prize by the Locus Foundation in 2014, and the Tau Sigma Delta Gold Medal, to name a few. You can find her work published in the New York Times, A+U, and Domus, among others. In addition, the studio's work was exhibited in the Graham Foundation, Chicago Architecture Biennale, Venice Biennale, Contemporary Art Museum in Monterey, Museo Amparo, T-Space Gallery, and the Center Pompidou. Please join me in welcoming Tatiana.
Thank you, Heather. It's for me an honor to be here today with you. It's incredible to be back in St. Louis. So I'm in St. Louis also, but we have to do this online, unfortunately. But it is really, for me, a fantastic opportunity of sharing the work we do into this context where we are also building a project. I will go ahead and share my screen. I thought very big part of our work really relates to the topic of domesticity, and the importance rely for me on the understanding that we humans have created architecture because one basic need that we have is to be protected, to be able to survive. But the other thing is that we have understood that it is not only about a shelter. We really are very complex social beings, and this really has allowed us to evolve into a place where we really the interaction of architecture has become another second basic need to provoke the necessary relationships in society. I think that in recent years, the city also has become a popular conversation in architectural culture, citing Pier Vittorio Aureli in his introductory essay for the book, The City as Project, and how he refers to that we have been growing with the familiar mantra today, more of the half of the population live in cities. But this nevertheless has not been enough to imagine a project for the city since at least half a century. And I think it's because it is very kind of widespread said that we think that it has become unthinkable to do a project for the city. The excuse is that it sounds really almost impossible. It's now more than ever a space, the city, that is shaped by those so-called abstract forces, but those forces that are most of the time pulling in counter directions. And those abstract forces are also sometimes called organic. But the truth is that those forces have nothing of organic, nor are abstract or innocent. Those are market forces that determine who and how can inhabit the territory. Forces that more and more have been expelling the majority to perpetuate capital and production. And coinciding again with Aureli, we need to really understand that nevertheless, this happens. Architecture determines the city. The city is finally determined by its architecture. In a city, there's infinite cities, and more we need to think that the city probably cannot be designed in its whole. But if we think that the city is at the end the result of each of these structures, of each side of the sum of each sidewalk, of each lamp, of each street bend, of each building, we really need to understand that architecture is at the end what the city is, the sum of this architecture. So every single intervention produces the city, or then bans at least not the city, but the people who live in it. The city is both the result of the necessity and the desire. The city exists because it's a place of gathering, of opportunity, of knowledge, of productivity, of cultural exchange. But primarily, it exists because us human beings need each other to exist. The city that we live today is the result of a society of production, the one that was built on carbon fossils energies, the era of energetic abundance, or the era of carbon form, as Elisa Iturbe calls it in her essay, Architecture and the Death of Modernity, of Carbon Modernity. The physical form of the city has been since its beginning the results of its form of production, and has only changed fundamentally by the form of energy that it's fueled with. Again, citing Elisa, it has had three fundamental forms within the three paradigms that society has been living. When we were the agriculture city, then the nomad city, the agriculture city, and now the industrial city. In the past 200 years, the city that we have existed is the industrial city. It has not changed in its true form, and that's what Elisa Iturbe refers to as the city of the carbon form city. It has been using the same form as of the usage of energy since then, and although it can be seen as a very different city from that of the late 18th and 19th century, of that messy one, to the more organized one and mechanized of the beginning of the 20th century, the Fordist city, to the one determined by development and consumerism, the post-Fordist city, or the city that we live today. Nevertheless, as I said again, this has always been, the carbon form city. The current pandemic is not causing the problems that the city faces today. The pandemic had exposed them and has for sure taken advantage of them. I would say that the new mantra today has become how the new post-COVID city will be. Nevertheless, as urgent as it's to think that, I think it's necessary and even more urgent, instead of thinking of what is a post-COVID city be, what is a post-carbon city? For me, that city is called the city of care. To arrive there is no doubt that we need to eliminate the use of carbon fossil energy fuels. But this is not enough, as well said by Maria Sherezade Giudici. To profoundly transform the city, we need to find new ways of living, but mostly new forms of social relationships. Definitely a new post-capitalist form. Our current city is built upon a fundamental frictions. To exist in it, we need to produce. But really is that to produce, the reality is that to produce, we really need to exist. If we don't understand the importance of care and reproductive labor at once, we are not going to be able to evolve. Care and reproductive labor is labor that is needed from all of us to be received by all of us who exist to exist. And that labor right now is not recognized as one, therefore is not paid. And when it's paid, is paid with the lowest wages possible. And that labor for sure is not even recognized by the majority of us as being a labor. Obviously, it's very easy to recognize that a children or an elderly need care, but all of us workers need care as well. We need to be rested, nurtured, and clean to go to work. This is work that has to be done beyond the productive hours in order to be able to survive those productive hours and to be productive. I say that the city of care has the recognition of this aspect of and this fundamental labor in its core. For me, then, it's really important to understand how we can reimagine our cities from the most fundamental unit, which is that intimate unit that allows us, first of all, to hold our own bare body to exist, and second of all, creates the platform for us to be able to be, first of all, existing and then productive. Five years ago, I was invited by Patrick Killian to build a new Cistercian monastery in the very east of Germany. I have then since been working on it, and for me has been really a possibility of understanding how a space can hold a body.
Buenos días. Oigan, vamos a vestirnos primero, ¿no?
Quiero más pera. Yo quiero más pera. Yo quiero más pera. Yo quiero más pera.
Ok, ahorita te
Yo quiero más pera. Yo quiero más pera.
¿Te quieres?
Mío.
Hay que coser.
De mi ropa. Y a mí también se me cayeron muchos de mi ropa. Oye.
¿Cómo te fue? ¿Cómo te fue en la escuela?
The monastery is not only the ultimate domestic space, it's the only typology that I ever encountered that has the perfect conditions and orchestration of what a body needs to exist, not only physically, but also socially. the understanding of the ritualistic aspect of the life of that the monks held is really important. We have bound in our existence that.
Termina de tu sándwich.
Tú te la di, mi amor. Corre por
Mari, ¿me puedes dar más
Mami,
fresas, por favor?
quiero algo dulce.
Ok, come algo.
¿Me la como?
No.
Allá.
Entonces, ese es el corazón y la donde va la semilla.
Niñitas.
Like the so-called notion of really pushing towards functionality and practicality, we have forgotten that we need these rituals to exist. And for sure not say that everybody should live like a monk, but I think that there are many possibilities of understanding of this life that was completely orchestrated and has been led the same way since the 11th century. So that's more than 9 centuries that the ritual that has held this order has helped them to exist in the same manner since they began. And we have been definitely studying the architecture, the Cistercian architecture of the monasteries. And what is really interesting is to understand that regardless of the differences in topographies, in sites, and in physical conditions, the typology of the monastery remains the same because it holds the ritual. And the most interesting part of it is that it really not only is orchestrated to be used in the hours of the day, during the different moments of the year, but also is able to really follow, or maybe I don't know what happened first, the hen or the egg, but it's really like a symbiotic relationship between space and body that I don't believe it happens anywhere else. As I said again, I don't think we should all live like monks, but I think that there are a lot of different aspects of understanding that of the understanding of these concepts that could really be transpolated into our cities, and I believe that they will allow us to expand our notion and possibility of both the integral individual self and then the collective self that we all are. The monks have a real interesting understanding on how to create these scales of relationships that allow them to escape from the individual self-being, the moments of the connection and the spiritual connection that they have to God, towards the collective environment. And I think that this is an incredible possibility that allows them to go out and then become these social beings, collective social beings, and to go then back in a stage way that makes really this flow to exist and to obviously create stronger connection and commitments to each step. So for the physical body is that that really that holds the possibility of their spiritual life in this world. And for them, the first expression and the first layer of protection is the robe. The robe, this is why it has a very specific design and a very specific expression, because as I said, it's both that. The second one and the second layer of protection is the cell, the individual cell. This is the place where they are able to reconstitute their body in order to again exist in both eras. Then the cell connects physically directly to the cloister, and the cloister is only shared by the members of the community that hold the same ritual and the same life. This then is a place where they start, like the social self emerges. Then this cloister is connected to the rest of the monastery, where there's an interaction with another community that serves different possibilities for the monastery. And then this connects to the exterior through the church, where the community from the exterior and the exterior congregate. And if you see the day flowing, they go in and out in this, always passing through the same phase, the same places, and then going back again. In a ritualistic way, yes, but also in a possibility of staging those in a rhythm that's allowed to be much more sustainable. We have done a party, and it's a very big monastery for 50 monks. As I said, it's going to be built in outside a little town called Neutzelle. The specific town that holds this monastery is called Treplen, and it's in the very east of Germany, border with Poland, east of Berlin, more or less, at that northern part of Brandenburg. But I think that, of course, it is a substantial project that will really be probably working for the rest of my life and even be afterwards. But I think that, as I said, the most kind of aspects that are going to be very representative of this is what we have learned. So first, as I said, like the staging of relationships, I think it's urgent that in a city of care, we can start considering how to build stronger communities. And we're not going to do that if we don't understand the necessity of these common spaces. There's one aspect about the private space that it's important to be kept, and private, I mean individual. And I think that by the notion of private and public in terms of property, with this we need to revise in very much senses, but I'm referring private on the notion of individual. And then again, how to then connect those to the notion of the collective public space, which right now that is just it's just the division between those two is a door, and it makes really an impossibility of relating to a very thorough and abstract and big collective when we don't have those stages of relationship. The second aspect I think it's really important is to understand that especially through modern times, we have completely erased the notion of the ritual, because that is something that is very specific to each individual human being. And we have transformed those rituals into habits that have really defined our contemporary spaces. And we have designed spaces for very specific functions that allow in search and in abstraction, they wanted to, kind of address a specific necessity of a human being. So we need to shower, we do bathrooms. We need to eat, we make kitchens. We need to sleep, we make bedrooms. We need to learn, we make classrooms. But those really completely ban the understanding of each self and each being in the space, and really eliminate the possibility of rituals to happen beyond those that are become our habitual habits. I think that there is a true necessity to create a revolution, and here I'm citing Silvia Federici at point zero. and therefore recognizing reproductive and care labor as the basis of the society. But for me, the revolution really comes in terms, architecturally speaking, on how we are building our domestic spaces. I really had not integrated the notion of how our current domestic definition of house that was basically laid down in the modern era has made an impact in our society in a way that has really left the majority out. It is a model that it's based on three basic frictions, as Fernanda Canales says. The first one is that it's done as if there were no other social possibilities of social relationships, meaning that the house is completely designed as for the heteropatriarchal family, the nuclear family, the husband, the wife, and the children, as if there were no other ways of coexistence. And the private and the public were two independent fractions. But if we see it, this really never happens. The second of the frictions is the house as a private property within everybody's reach, as if when considering it a commodity, it would not be determined by market-driven dynamics, making it unaffordable and impossible for the majority. And the house as a place of rest, as if work could be separated from life, and as housework would disappear. The house really is the place that encompasses the most important work. And by really proposing it and creating all our cities upon that notion that this is a place of rest, we're not going to be able to eliminate these frictions and then therefore create a sustainable way of living. We have been in the office really trying to understand how we could create models that expand that possibility in different ways. And the first project that I'm presenting here, and one of the first ones that we pushed into understanding how could we create architecture that becomes a platform for anyone to create their own existence, was a strategy to have a house that could be built in not endless, obviously this is not infinite, but many possibilities of inhabiting, by spaces that they could be, by its position and modularity, very different things. A room could be a bedroom, could not be a bedroom, and a terrace could become a kitchen that becomes an exterior kitchen or an interior kitchen or a no kitchen, a room that is double height or becomes then two rooms, and a possibility of inhabiting a house in many different ways that right now it is obviously not possible because of the layout that is described. We have designed this, we have done this design strategy that has been then applied in different places. And we have understood that obviously it is something that moved forward from the static definition of the home that exists right now, but it needed to comply with some rules, and I will explain why, and codes later on. And that therefore, obviously, it gave much more flexibility, much more possibility of those others, for example, in this image that you see on the sides that were done as shoe boxes, as many of them repeated it on the whole country are. But it also kind of limits the possibility of the expression of the self again. How can we go further? And this is a question that I have been trying to answer, and probably I will not answer ever. But I think that one of the projects that really allow us to see things very, very differently was when we participated in the reconstruction of a little town that lost circa 400 homes in a state in Mexico, El Estado de Mexico, in a little town called San Simón el Alto, after an earthquake that happened in 19 of September 2017, which was the day I was the first time here for the project in St. Louis, Missouri. And that day, really a lot of houses in probably 30% of the territory in Mexico went down. And the reason that they went down, it was because 90% of those, because they were badly built. Of course, the earthquake was very bad, but one of the aspects that really created a very impactful role, it was that all these houses were built basically in the last 30 years. When in these little towns, they started getting the new industrialized materials, because the NAFTA agreement with the United States and Canada opened borders to cheap industrialized materials that would never had arrived otherwise to these towns, or that never had arrived before. People saw these materials as a real possibility to become, kind of modern and into the contemporary world and progress, because of many reasons. I'm not going to detain myself on that, but it's really something that has been implanted in society nowadays. So in the whole world, as if we could all live the same, and as if we could all use the same materials, as if we would need all the same materials to live, or the same way of living. And therefore, the materials were never used before, and they were used in not the correct ways. So when the earthquake came, the houses came down. So we started doing reconstruction, helping the reconstruction. And what we realized is that these people knew how to inhabit the territory much more and in better ways than we did. So what we only provided was technical advice on the use of the materials, trying to push to the understanding of the knowledge of the town, and to really allow them to see that the knowledge that they have created through centuries on inhabiting this town is what really is the wisdom and the answer for that, and not the new ones. So we only accompanied the process. We're like kind of sheltering the process in order to exist and to happen. We also were kind of catalysts of different funds to make them possible. But the main idea was to allow them to build their own houses as they were building them forever. Of course, this social production of space is really, for me, kind of the way housing should happen, but it's not able to happen within different urban and larger environments, especially larger collectives, although there are very beautiful examples of collectives that have been able to do, even in contemporary terms, incredible places. There are like a lot of these collective socially produced homes and buildings in Berlin, for example, has been a response towards the gentrification and escalation of prices after the wall fell down. So they're really incredible examples, but not only there, the whole world is plagued by that. In the United States, there are a lot of initiatives of community land trust projects. And I think that this is something that it's really I think that it's easily the platform that everybody needs to create their own existence. So for me, it's how to understand and how to go beyond the notion of the traditional house to create different possibilities, no? As Dolores Hayden has been clearly saying to us all these years, that urbanism and architecture have been instrumental in promoting discrimination of many types, especially towards women, because of promoting this model. I believe that it also discriminates cultures, discriminates ethnicities, discriminates the possibilities of different people to exist, different social arrangements, different cultural understandings, and on top of all, different rituals to happen. So we have been trying to understand how probably this is a model for a house in Ocoyoacac, which is a little town again outside of Mexico. How and this was proposed as a part of a laboratory of housing that was called by the National Bank for Subsidies of Housing. And what we propose is that they're not houses as volumes, as blocks, but they're modules, and these modules can be used for different things, can be arranged around a patio or not in different ways, and can really be built in as many as you want or as little as you can. And they can not only provide different configurations for those who live differently, but also different possibilities to create a community that, when this becomes an aggregation, provides different opportunities of relationship, accepting that all of them, first of all, form part of this community, but also all of them are individual beings that need their own identity. I think that that is one of the aspects that we were pursuing at Olive West. And as it has been said and very well described and introduced by Heather, we had been working in this project since 2017 with the idea of promoting a different possibility for a very central neighborhood of this city. One of the drivers obviously was laid out since many years ago by Emily Pulitzer, where she had the idea of understanding how to create a typology that it is really respecting the notion of the individual living of the single house, but how can this become part of a solution for community engagement and community forming, and a new typology that has really a different proposal than the single row house that is really very popular in this area, or the suburban house. And how can a city within a city can hold this? So we started working on the understanding of creating these very private spaces that could start forming or allowing those semi-private spaces to start having openings and relationships to those more common spaces that are shared between the neighbors. And then how does that really relate to the exterior and the street and the block? So we created this plan within Olive West, the north and the south side, that are really trying to understand how those intrinsic intermediate relationships are forming to allow a community to exist and to coexist, although allowing and understanding the differences of each of the houses and each of the community members, but having like kind of what Heather was saying, a glue that referring to Fumiko Maki, how can this, what is the glue here? And obviously there is a very important idea of the design of the common ground with different features that are shared sometimes by the whole community. For example, the pool that could be used at some points for everybody, but other spaces that are also kind of completely collective, like the little gardens that we have. We have a contemplating garden, an edible garden, a meditation space, but we have also set up like kind of different types of playgrounds with not only with the typical idea of a playground, because a playground normally is associated to that needed for the children. We think all of us play and all of us need play in our lives. So it's how can we integrate those notions into these spaces that are being created in between the houses, and how can they be part of the community, the internal community, but also accepting at some point the external community. For us in Olive West, what was also important was to understand how could we relate to the history of the city and the history of the place that had been completely erased almost, but only one building when we arrived. So we kept the original building. It was never a question. Even Emily always had the vision of keeping Wolfner, which had been empty for 30 years, but that has been the oldest building existing in the site, which also had an architectural value. And those who were already destroyed or had no value how we could keep the materials. So we kept the materials and we used them in the whole site. The bricks that were used for the other buildings that were there, a couple of buildings that were completely destroyed. And we then tried to really understand how to link this plan also to that history. So we knew that the site had a history of different uses. First, it was an agricultural land, then it was industrial land, then it was commercial and residential, then it became residential again. So how can we bring something of that? We discovered through Steve Trump, who's a member of this National Building Art Center founded by Larry Gills, and that is here in St. Louis, Missouri, that has a very important collection of parts of buildings of different times, mainly buildings of in here in St. Louis, Missouri. So we wanted to understand how we could reflect the history of the site with the usage of these elements. So we designed, well, we acquired some of those buildings and we scattered them in the landscape, representing all those moments of history that the building has had. So we have elements that represent the moment of the agricultural land, some elements that represent the commercial area. So they're coming from commercial buildings in San Luis or from industrial buildings in San Luis, and we have scattered them in around the place. As for the house we built, we designed, and it's now one of them is built and more coming. We started with the idea that these were going to be two attached houses, the smaller units, and when we were studying, we realized that there was an incredible opportunity to do one larger house, and we wanted to create one that could probably be the resemblance of part of the history here. We realized that the idea of stacking two floors together to build one house could be very beneficial to allow a structure to have external and interior spaces that have the fundamental principle, as I was saying, of really integrating at very private areas to those semi-private, which is still inside the house, but they are already being open to the exterior, and how those relate then to the exterior. So we created this understanding of the two volumes of overlap that give up the possibility of these two terraces in the lower ground that are roofed, but also that give those two terraces in the up ground that can be exterior spaces that are already putting you in the landscape. We thought that this central space, kind of the core of the building, and the stair obviously becomes kind of the connector and the pivot of these two. So the stair becoming this element, the sculptural element that is inside the building for us was also very important. There are four different houses done by four different offices. One is ours, and the other three are by Macías Peredo, Productora, and Moss. Macías Peredo being a very local practice in Guadalajara. Guadalajara is the second largest city in Mexico. And they have a very thorough practice in doing very interesting buildings, especially in the domestic realm. By Productora, who's been an office that is founded by 4 members. They are a very international office that is based in Mexico City, but their 4 members are from different parts. One is Argentinian, one is from Belgium. The other 2 are Mexicans, and they live and work both in the US and Mexico. The other house is built by Moss. The other model of house is built by Moss, by an architecture office founded by Hilary Sample and Michael Meredith, who also have been working thoroughly in the domestic realm. Hilary is actually the head of housing in Columbia, in GSAP, Columbia University. And this is a house of Macías Peredo. And like these 4 models of houses are then repeated in the plan, in the landscape, in different dimensions with different directions, creating what I believe is a rich unity of different parts. And with this, I believe that we are trying to promote the coexistence of these very different types of ways of living and individuals in one single building. We have taken this idea of the understanding of freeing the architecture from its charge of having to be specifically used in one direction, towards the notion that architecture as existing is in itself an aesthetic statement, and that you can never free the architecture from that, but you can free the architecture from being an architectural statement directed specifically and only working for one single function. So in this house done for Spain, what we tried to do was to create these modules that definitely have a very specific aesthetic expression, but that they are not specifically designed for any specific function. So anyone can inhabit them the way they want. We even explore the possibility of doing a different type of representation, so they could allow us to express that they can be used, these modules, as one single house, one module, or as a single house, all of them, or part of them being utilized, part of them being sculptures in the landscape. We don't know. We want these to be kind of the first experiment of those, of being the platform that is only a platform for anyone to create their own possibility of existence. And then after that house that it hasn't been built, hopefully will be built soon, we have developed a project that that the brief called for a house. They invited 15 to 20 architects in Germany. There were different architects and led by Nerash Baita and Christoph Hesse. And they were calling for these architects to design a house for the new ways of life. And the new ways of life for them was described as working and living in the same space. Note, this was 2017, before the pandemic, but they were already thinking that they were foreseeing the new ways of life. And for me, when I read the brief, for me it was very strange, because working and living in the same space not only has been the way humanity has existed since its beginnings. For me, as again I say, like, the most important work is done in the house, so it is primarily a workspace. So how can we design rather a house for new ways of life? How can we design a house for the different ways of life, not knowing who is going to inhabit and how? So we decided to design a house instead of thinking of 2 bedrooms, a bathroom, a living room, and a kitchen. We said, why don't we promote spaces for different types of activities that promote different types of emotions? So we chose 6 of those definitions that we did in this chart, and we collaged them. I'm not going to go into why we collaged them, how we collaged, because that's a whole lecture on itself. But we collaged those 6 different spaces. And when we had the definition of how those spaces should embrace light, how they should arrive to the side, to touch the ground, how they would expose themselves to the exterior or retreat to the interior, then we collaged them all together, we traced them, and we finally were evolving the design towards the final definition. I must say that when we arrived here, I was very skeptical about we really started a process of doing a project in a very different way. And when we finally arrived here, I thought, well, we could have done it the same if we would have started, we're going to do a kitchen and 2 bathrooms and 2 bedrooms. But then, like a year after or 2 years after, a couple came saying that they wanted to build a house, and that they were already really imagining themselves in the house. And they really imagine inhabiting the space in a very completely different way than how I would have imagined it. They really imagine the space where the kitchen was put in a completely different place where I would have thought of putting it. And then I realized it was exactly what we wanted. We wanted really a space freed of those ideas, of those notions on how do we have to live, and open them to a more really open possibility for allowing everyone. We have been perpetuating the model of the archetypical house in the past 100 years in a way that for me it even has become scary. If you ask anyone in the whole world, from a little child to an elderly person from Nebraska to Sri Lanka, you will get probably the same type of drawing. And this type of living, as I said, it's not only based on three very important frictions, but I think that it has even arrived to define in some codes in different parts of the world, for example, in Mexico, how we have to live. But the worst part of the story is that it is not only being built in those codes, like in Mexico, to kind of become minimums, they have become maximums. So a house in Mexico, to start with, in a little background, I'm just trying to wrap up. Don't think that I'm going to start a conversation. In Mexico, the right to own a dignified and enjoyable house is a constitutional right. So the Constitution says that the law has to describe what is an enjoyable and dignified space. And the law describes that it has to have a kitchen, a bathroom, 2 rooms, one larger, one smaller, and 1 living room. That definition, not only of minimums, has not only become maximum, has really transformed the way of living in the whole country into a very difficult position, because everybody wants their dream house, but definitely majority cannot have it. And what is a dream house when you are a Mayan that lives in the Mayan Peninsula, where 30 degrees centigrade, which I'm sorry, but I never know in Fahrenheit. Sorry, the world is in centigrades. I believe it's something like 100. How do you imagine that this person can encompass their activities that they're normally done integrated in the exterior in one single enclosed space? The way they live is culturally, socially very different. But right now, the way the society has imposed them, not only the society, the code, the bank, the subsidies has imposed them to live, is to live completely different in a weather that doesn't respond to these things. So I really think that we really need to push forward and really see the domestic environment with new eyes, in a different vision, and understanding that, yeah, we do need rooms for our own privacy, but that we all live and sleep differently. We use the room in a very different ways. Not only do we use the room in different ways, we sleep differently, and we not only that, we not all sleeps in beds, and we should not all promote everybody to sleep the same way, because we are completely different. And yes, we do really all appreciate the technology that has evolved so far to allow us to have a running bathroom in the majority of the cases, but unfortunately not everybody even. But why did we decide that it was ideal to put it in one room that sometimes is even not naturally illuminated and ventilated? It's done mechanically. When did we forget that the bathroom is much more than that place only to allow our personal function of cleaning? No, we have forgotten that this intimate space can become, can regain the possibility of these intimate relationships to have different possibilities by sharing an intimate space in a more ritualistic way of understanding how to nurture our body. And I'm not going to go into the real controversial space of the house that has really been able to perpetuate the discrimination of the most vulnerable in the economy ones that right now are still women in 95% of the cases. but how it has mechanized the way we have understanding the notion of nurturing our body, has isolated women, but has also made the understanding that someone has to cook for us. Definitely, we all do have to eat, but we don't have to expect someone to cook for us all the time, but also we don't have to do these things isolated, or maybe we do, but some of us, we don't. And what about the living space, no? That kind of represents really the notion of the completed house. We, in this pandemic, we have understood that maybe this living space needs to become really much more for us than only a representational space. And the garden has really only existed there to really put the symbol of the American dream house everywhere. But can we all have a garden? And can't we use that garden to become really that space that connects us to what we are, to our nature, to our food, to our own nutrition, to our light? And how can we then understand that in a very dense city that is space is very scarce? Well, of course, how can we get rid of the notion of that the house is not complete if we don't have a car? Because obviously this perpetuated in millions and in billions of people that we are is absolutely unsustainable, as we know. So really, for me, it's urgent that we really try to think what is a revolution at point zero, and how it really then it's opening possibilities for the new city of care. Thank you so much. And with this, I finish. I think I'm a little bit over time, but I really would like to see if there are any questions that I could answer at this time. Thank you very much.
Great. So if anybody has any questions, please, you can put them into the Q&A or put them into the chat, and then we can read them off for Tatiana. Well, as people are starting to form questions, it looks like we got some coming in here. All right. Just a thank you for a beautiful, thoughtful, and critical lecture. You know, as we wait for some more questions to come in, I'm also kind of curious. I know you said it would be for another lecture potentially, but the use of kind of representation. It seems very specific. The references to kind of paintings and artwork, and then your kind of techniques of collage. Maybe just a kind of quick, not a full lecture on that.
Yes, thank you. Well, since ever, I have really tried to understand how we can engage, the real humans who are going to inhabit, in the places in our own creation and possibility of expression of our own work. I think that the tools that I learned in school were completely limiting me from that. I very easily, at the moment I started working with someone to create their space for living, that not anybody else understands. Very few people that have not studied architecture understand technical drawings, plan sections, and facades that for all are just automatically, you see them and you understand. It's a different language. But also not only that they are really producing subjectivity, right? So because you draw them, people think they only understand space through you and through how you see it. And they are like literally almost like, I would say, a big majority of people who even look at the plan whenever they're furnishing their space. But that's only, first of all, a lot of times we only furnish those plans to see if the standard furniture works. Second of all, what is standard and why standards? No, I mean, they don't serve anything. And third of all, then we are banning the possibility of communicating with that other to inhabit in this place. They're the way they really are. So I started really searching for different ways of representing what we do since the beginning, no? And we started thinking on how to not do these very precise architectural drawings not only because obviously those serve for different purposes, no? And obviously they're very practical because that's a way of communicating with the engineers, with the contractors, with the people who have built it. But I think that that's not the way we should communicate architecture to anyone who is inhabiting or to our constituents, because I think that bans the possibility of them to become part of the process and to become part of that architecture. So for me, it started a search on how, and obviously I went, I'm very inspired by art, because art knows how to integrate our own idea into their product. It's not a product, but into the art, you know. Every piece is interpreted by ourselves, and every piece allows you to be the interpreter of that. It is for that, no, for you to be the interpreter. And architecture is exactly the contrary, although it's inhabited by you, no? So how can you become the interpreter of that place also to be able to live? So that's how our aim of the architecture is, but I think it starts with the representation. So I integrated, I started thinking how artists do that. And so this is why I was looking a lot into painting, into sculpture, into collage, into photography, and how can that be integrated in the process of creation, but also in the process of representation of the architecture.
Yeah, great, thank you. We do have a few questions coming in. I think this one may be quite related to the one, the answer you were just giving, but how do you see the process of introducing a new definition of house when so many people are stuck on preconceived ideas of what a house should be?
Yes, well, this is a difficult thing, but I believe that is very, for some it's very easy, no, to see it and to go through this path, because when you say this, a lot of people can relate to it. For some it's more difficult, but I think that one of the most important reasons is that there are no opportunities of people to looking at things differently because they don't have anything different available, no? And I think that is a start. And as soon as they see it, it's very difficult to convince people, people that build it, people that sell them to go for it. But as soon as it happens, it's just like a domino, no? It triggers a full set of things. And I also think that we architects need to become much more critical, because we have been tools of perpetuating capital and discrimination in several ways. And for me, it was a very difficult process, and not difficult because I didn't know, a process of really a revelation process not so long ago, that I really understood that my architecture was really promoting discriminative acts towards women. And when I understood that, because I was asked to present my work into a panel that celebrated the International Day of Women, I was starting to put a lecture that would show how my projects were really opening channels for women. And then I realized I was perpetuating every single space that discriminated women in. And this is when I started to become really critical about it. So it's not easy, it's not direct, because I also grown in this system. I was learning architecture this way, and I just followed, right? But I think that we have to open more critical channels in order to allow much more things, because these houses not only perpetuate discrimination, perpetuate notions of family that are really not how everybody lives, are perpetuating notions of capitalism that not everybody can follow, and that a lot of them are discriminated. So how can we become critical, and how can architecture become critical to the change?
Excellent. So I've got a few more questions here. Says, thank you for your presentation. I'm really interested by your radical approach to the architectural process. In your work, you seem to embrace time. How domestic spaces may change over time. what do you consider the life cycle of a home, a lifetime or multiple generations who might pass home down to their children?
This is a very interesting question, and I think that is one of the most critical questions of spaces, of architecture. No, of course, I think I have thought many times on this, and I really believe that architecture should be a conversation that evolves through time and through different generations and through different moments of life. And this evolution, for me, is what it would. The possibility of this evolution is that would be really ideal, specifically for domestic architecture, for sure. No, I understand there's also a necessity of architecture to be the representation of the historical moment, because this is how we relate to history in many cases, because that's what keeps existing. Although I don't know what is going to keep existing from the things we're doing today, but some of them will. And those are the ways we can relate to other times, because unfortunately we are not infinite, no. So, but I think that the domestic space definitely needs to be understood as place of evolution, because our lives evolve very much. First of all, by doing domestic architecture, I have realized that not only we are completely different people, each of us in the whole world, even if we grew up in the same family with the same way and we were raised the same way, my sister and I just really have a completely different conception of how life it is. And then not only that, we are different people and we inhabit different ways, depending on the time of life that we're living. So really, I think that there is a necessity of thinking of this. I don't know what is this architecture, and this is something I've been trying to think, and to think how is it this architecture that becomes a platform for everybody to create their own existence, but also is like evolving as a conversation evolves through time.
All right, so I've got two more questions that really revolve around the On Olive project. And maybe I'll kind of read them together and see what you want to kind of pick out. So can you describe how you presented the master plan for On Olive competition to your client? What was their feedback, and can you share any input from that initial process? So that's one question. And then another is, are gates allowed on the On Olive project? Being in a city that it constantly defines and protects space through steel bars, how do you design with problematic elements such as these gates, or plan to limit the future installation or use of gates?
Yeah, so two interesting questions. The first one, for me, it was not a competition. I was asked to develop this project. There was a competition to include more architects then, and I think it was not only my conception. I think Emily really had a very clear idea on how she wanted to do this, and I think we were just a translator of that vision towards a new possibility of the city in a plan. And I think that the important thing here is how to negotiate with those very private spaces that become semi-private, that become common, that become collective in a city that needs fences to protect. I don't think that it needs, but people, the sense of security that we have created is the same as a house. It's translated into that. So yes, in the beginning, there were no fences. Then they appeared in the project. And I hope that sometimes we were trying to negotiate how the fences could be more transparent. Some of them are more transparent, some of them are more static, some of them are lower, some of them are higher. They all give different types of signs, and they talk to different things. And my hope is that one day they come down.
Excellent. Tatiana, I want to thank you on behalf of WashU for the great lecture. Really excited about all the work you're doing here in St. Louis. Thank you again for taking the time to come speak with us.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure for me to be here tonight. I wish I was with you all in the same room, but at least I'm here in this room, this digital room. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you, Chandler.